Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to check in IELTS Writing Task 2 together and we'll discuss the strengths and weaknesses in this task. As you can see, I have already made a few suggestions and left a few comments here on the right side. And at the end I will tell you what score this task can get in the real test based on the 4 scoring criteria. Now, let's read the question first to have a better understanding of the task. The question, let me zoom in a bit. Okay, the question is, some people feel that governments should take a large proportion of people's salaries to pay for necessary public services, such as roads and schools. So technically we're discussing whether governments should take a large proportion of people's salaries, as here you can see in the question, to spend on roads and schools, well as necessary public services. Others feel that high taxes are a bad thing. So there is side A, which thinks that high taxation is necessary, and there is side B, which thinks that high taxation is not a good thing. Okay, so and then this is a discuss both views and give your own opinion kind of question, which means the examiner is looking for one point of view here and then the opposite point of view here in these two body paragraphs. Sometimes you would probably be advised to go for a third body paragraph for this part that says give your own opinion. This is not necessary, to be honest, as I personally believe that every single thing you write in an essay is your personal opinion. You don't really have to quote any of these ideas from other people. So, all right, beginning with the introduction paragraph. In many countries, the tax is what has been written here. I changed it to the taxes that governments collect. So this has to be an essential resource for providing public services such as school and roads. So we see that it has been, the topic has been paraphrased. It is somehow a successful paraphrase of the topic, so we're good here. While some people believe that a large percentage of people's salaries, it was salary to begin with, and I changed it to salaries because, it's not one salary for people collectively, it's like each individual with their own salary. You also see the same thing in the question here. It says a large proportion of people's salaries, plural, must go on paying taxes. I think it is not reasonable to put such pressure on the public. All right, so I have a clear, let's say, point of view, a clear position here so far. So a wonderful job. I always recommend having a clear position in the introduction paragraph as well as your other paragraphs, the body paragraphs and the conclusion paragraph. Just make sure that you have a clear position any chance you get. Admittedly, taxes are necessary for improvement and maintenance of public services. All right, so this here is the topic sentence, and it is telling us that this paragraph will talk about the benefits of taxes, and the fact that they are necessary, the reason why taxes are necessary. So we have maintenance and improvement of public services. The citizens of so what has been written here is the citizens of almost all of the developed countries. Now, this of and the are extra. We don't need these. It should be almost all developed countries. Now, I have left a comment here. It is not about being developed or developing. Almost every country's government asks for tax. So this is not necessary here. This sort of brings a question. Why developed countries? Why are we only discussing developed countries, not, well, developing or underdeveloped countries? Isn't tax a thing in underdeveloped or developing countries? Is it only for developed countries? I mean, why do we go with only developed countries here? That's the question. Sometimes, if you remove something in a sentence and, well, it doesn't change a thing, it would if you don't. So, if I were you, I would probably not go with developed countries here. Almost all countries are required to pay taxes, which is one of the reasons why it's better to go with why after reasons. One of the reasons why these nations have such good infrastructures. All right, good. In these nations, now, I believe here we are going to read why paying taxes would lead to good infrastructures. In these nations, part of the money collected through taxes is spent on developing transport systems. Okay, understandable. Building up new roads. Very good. Okay. And highways, roads and highways, and maintaining them. Okay, so it's building and also taking care of them. Perfect, good. So far, I have my public services. Basically, maintenance of public services in forms of roads and transport. Good. A noticeable portion of taxes is also allocated to education. That is another public service. Clearly, construction of schools and universities with comfortable classrooms, I would probably, I'm not sure, comfortable classrooms. Well, are there any, well, uncomfortable classrooms out there? Well, that's a question. In well-equipped laboratories. It was labs here. I would prefer laboratory in full form. Need a considerable amount of budget. Okay, so we know that the amount of budget we're talking about will be from taxes, and we're still talking about education, which is our other public service. Good. Which many governments cannot provide without the public's assistance. So here I have another, let's say, recommendation. Here we have, I mean, the candidate has written the public's assistance. I would go with the public's monetary contribution. Well, assistance is not necessarily monetary. It's not necessarily about money, but taxes are. And well, technically here we're only talking about money because we're talking about amount of budget, which means, well, this budget is not labor. This budget is not only like menial tasks. No, it's only about money. But public assistance is not only about money. That is why my recommendation is monetary contribution. This will make the sentence, which many governments cannot provide without the public's monetary contribution. Okay, perfect. Now, this paragraph lacks a concluding statement. I'm going to write it here, lacks a concluding statement. A concluding statement, well, as the name suggests, concludes everything that we have discussed in this paragraph. Okay, however, there must be a strict limit in how much tax people have to pay. Okay, now this is also another clear topic sentence telling us that this paragraph is not going to talk about the benefits of taxes anymore, but rather why we need to limit the amount of tax that people are required to pay. In many places, people already find it difficult to make ends meet because their salary is barely enough to pay for. Okay, so what was initially written here was barely enough to pay for the basics of life. I made changes to this. Now it is their salary is barely enough to pay for the basic needs of their lives. Well, technically we're talking about different people, so that is their lives, and then instead of basics, I would go with basic needs, such as accommodation, transportation, food, clothing, and bills. All right, so far it is very coherent, and well, I have a clear understanding of what this is. Now, let's see if this paragraph is in line with the task. Let's see if this paragraph is answering a part of the question. Now here, let's read the topic sentence once more. There must be a strict limit in how much tax people have to pay. Now the question here is, others feel that high taxes are a bad thing. Okay, now what I need is to talk about why high taxes are a bad thing. Let's see if this paragraph explains why high taxes are a bad thing. Okay, so we know that in some places, some people do not receive high salaries, and their basic salary is barely enough to pay for their basic needs. We have accommodation, transportation, food, clothing, and bills as their basic needs. Now, this means that many citizens are under financial pressure. Okay, all right, they are already under financial pressure. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the word already here. Are already under financial pressure. It seems unfair that governments, if you notice here I added a plural s here, that governments increase this pressure by, so it was initially increase this pressure by increasing tax rates. Now this has a problem. We're not talking about increasing tax rates, we're talking about asking for tax or not, or asking for high tax or not. Now, I made another change here. Instead of that, we're going with, it seems unfair that governments increase this pressure by unfair imposition of high taxes. This doesn't mean increasing what already was there. No, it technically means the governments should not impose high taxes in their countries. Okay, so let's just read this part once again just to make sure we have a clear understanding of what the sentence is. The corrected sentence is, this means that many citizens are already under financial pressure. It seems unfair that governments increase this pressure by unfair imposition of high taxes. Okay, I might also want to make some changes here because, well, we don't want to repeat the word unfair, so I would go with, it does not seem fair. Okay, now that's what we have. This means that many citizens are already under financial pressure. It does not seem fair that governments increase this pressure by unfair imposition of high taxes, making life even more difficult for, I would probably say, their citizens instead of the citizens, because we're talking about governments. Now we're talking about their citizens. Okay, to continue, in fact, governments may run the risk of protests. This run the risk of something is a very good collocation. I recommend using it. Governments may run the risk of protests. Now here it was, and a high immigration rate. Now, keep in mind that, well, moving from your country and protests, well, these two are not nearly the same thing. This "and" as a linker is suggesting that these two fall under the same category. My recommendation is to go with or even, because, well, yes, there's protests, but then high immigration rate is probably even worse. Well, because your country needs people. But if there is a high immigration rate, there is not enough people even to, organize protests. So that's my recommendation. Governments may run the risk of protests or even a high immigration rate. There was a comma here that I am deleting. Here it says delete comma, because, well, this here is a conditional sentence, governments blah blah blah, if they raise the taxes. This is a conditional sentence, technically a complex sentence, and a complex sentence does not require a comma in the middle between the clauses. If the subordinate clause, aka the dependent clause, comes second. So this here, if they raise the taxes in these nations, this is the subordinate clause, also known as the dependent clause. And since this is coming second, as opposed to the first clause, which is the independent clause, we do not need the comma here. I recommend reading about different types of sentences and sentence structures to understand the rule behind this. Here also there is these nations. I'm not really sure what nations we're referring to. There is these nations. So there is a lack of clear referencing. And it's very important to refer to certain things. To have clear referencing. Okay, so the first paragraph talks about the benefits of taxes and why taxes are necessary, which means, well, the first part of the question is addressed. The second paragraph talks about the problems and also why there should be a limit in how much tax people have to pay, which means, well, we're somehow addressing the second part here, saying others feel that high taxes are a bad thing. Now here I know that high taxes are a bad thing because people are already under financial pressure, and then if we add more by unfair imposition of high taxes, we're going to make it even more difficult for the citizens. And as a result, it might lead to protests or even a high immigration rate. This here, I'm going to say, is a clear concluding statement, a concluding sentence for this paragraph. So, not a problem here. Now, the main problem when it comes to the conclusions in this essay is here in the conclusion paragraph. I'm not talking about the second part of it, I'm talking about the first part of it. Here it says, in conclusion, although taxes are necessary, and if this here is summarizing this whole paragraph, I don't see an accurate summary. I only see taxes are necessary, which, well, is here as well. Taxes are necessary. I don't even see improvement in maintenance of public services mentioned here in the conclusion paragraph. I have made two changes here. I've actually typed a new conclusion paragraph. Here we have, well, I have kept the second part. This part you see, governments must be very careful. Well, it is right here. I basically copied and pasted this here. The first part, though, I've made a few changes. In conclusion, it is true that taxes can play a decisive role in public services such as education and transport. So the first difference here is I have mentioned education and transport because, well, we did talk about them here in this paragraph, and, well, we did talk about them here in the introduction, and it is also mentioned here in the topic, in the question. The second difference is this one here is a one-sentence paragraph, which is not recommended, to be honest. I have made two different sentences here. Well, this one is what I wrote, and then I separated it by putting a period here and a cohesive device to show contrast. However, and then the rest of what the candidate had already written, I did not make a change here. However, governments must be very careful about how much tax they ask the public to pay in order to prevent suffocating people financially. All right, now let's take a look at the score. To this task, I am giving a 6 for task response. This could be 7 if the position was more clear, or I'm going to say if this paragraph had a concluding sentence, or if the conclusion here was more concise. The cohesion and coherence is also 7, which means, well, yes, I definitely understand the task. It is coherent, not a problem. It is also somewhat cohesive, not a problem there. Sometimes there are issues such as what we see here, a lack of referencing, which falls under the category of cohesion and coherence. For lexical resources and grammatical range and accuracy, I'm also giving 7 to both. The main reason is the number of the mistakes we see here for both grammar and lexical resources. Without these mistakes, there are definitely better chances for higher scores. Now, the overall score here is a 6.5. I might be a bit strict here. This task could also receive a band 7. Definitely would if the conclusions were much better. But I don't see a reason why this candidate shouldn't get a better score with only more practice. This is a very well-written task, and it shows that the candidate has control over their let's say grammar and vocabulary knowledge, which is wonderful. He or she only needs some practice to, I'm going to say, control the task response and the cohesion and coherence better. Thank you for watching this. Please follow and subscribe to my channel, and I will post more videos like this.